everyone. You're watching Be the Good, Rappler's community show about advocacies, causes, and people on a mission. I'm Pia Renada, Rappler's head of community. May is Heritage Month, and so we thought it timely to feature a heritage-related advocacy for our first May episode. And there is nothing more timely to discuss than the proposed law to declare Quiapo as a heritage zone. We also want to take up the concerns of another vibrant community in Escolta, another historic district in Manila. I want to introduce my guests today. We have two from government and two from advocate communities. I'm happy to welcome Senator Loren Legarda, Manila 3rd District Representative Joel Chua, heritage advocate and founder of the Heritage Collective Stephen Pamorada, and Robby Sylianteng from the First United Building Community in Escolta. So welcome. Thank you so much for being with me today. Yeah, okay. So we're going to head right into it. No? So first, it's really interesting to know that, to hear that there are efforts to revitalize two districts. So we, of course, we have Quiapo and we have Escolta, both in Manila. And it's very interesting to know that last Tuesday, May 7, Senator Loren and Congressman Chua had a hearing about the bill to declare Quiapo as a heritage zone. And we also know that there have been similar efforts for Escolta, but a different route. So alam natin there was a resolution, for example, from NHCP to declare it as a heritage zone, pero wala pang ordinance. So these are the two things happening in terms of the government side in declaring these two historic districts as heritage zones. And we really want to talk about this more. It's a Heritage Month, diba? And we also know that last year, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. signed the cultural mapping law, which Senator Loren was a big part of. And we want to know what has happened since then, especially when it comes to protecting our heritage districts, and really what is the best way to go about revitalizing these kinds of historic districts. So first, though, let's zero in dun sa Quiapo Heritage Zone bills. So Senator and Representative Chua, no, you both proposed this bill in your respective chambers. It's passed in the House, but it's still pending in the Senate. So I wanted to know, what does Heritage Zone Declaration mean? In your respective bills, what does it mean technically? Like, what is the definition of it, and how would that affect communities within those districts? Siguro, Senator, we can start with your bill.
First of all, thank you very much for this program, Be the Good, because it really gives focus, importance to the good things happening, and there are a lot. Yes, May is Heritage Month, and the Quiapo bill is just one of many culture, heritage, history measures that we are tackling in the Senate. Yes, we had one hearing for the declaration of Quiapo as a heritage zone. What does it mean? Heritage would mean not just built structure and landmarks, not just rituals and practices. It would be both tangible and intangible heritage. So it would name certain structures, and I don't have to read all, there are a lot of it within Quiapo that will be declared as a heritage structure once this is declared or enacted into law. But even if it is assuming not enacted into law, there are, under the 2009 National Cultural Heritage Act, provisions that the National Commission on Culture and the Arts, the National Historical Commission of the Philippines can actually declare, and they have been declaring, and even other agencies of government. So there's a process of declaration of heritage areas. So I welcome the declaration of Quiapo as a heritage zone if this is enacted into law, and that's a reason why we're giving it time. There are challenges along the way, just like any piece of legislation. Why is this so important? First, the center of life in Manila, Metro Manila, and Philippine life, the Quiapo Church. It is not just religious, it's also cultural, historical. It speaks about the Filipino as a people. Many of those, even the vendors, the stores around the Quiapo Church, but there are also private homes, there are edifices that need to be preserved. But aside from what we see with our eyes and what we feel when we go there, there are many practices, or what we call intangible cultural heritage, that must be remembered, that must be documented, that speaks about us as Filipinos. And this is also what I want to include for culture mapping. You're correct, Pia, in saying that the culture mapping law is finally enacted into law. Just for the record, I filed that when I was a young senator at 38 years old. It's passed now in my 4th term in the Senate, but I'm grateful that finally my colleagues saw the light and supported it unanimously. Now, what to do? We need to fund the law, which I did as Vice Chair of the Committee on Finance in the Senate, and I've been doing culture mapping in my home province of Antique, in other areas and provinces. We can do a culture mapping of Quiapo even if this heritage zone law is not yet enacted. So just to sum up, when we say heritage zone, it is not just built structure. It is not just physical landmarks. It is also the intangible cultural heritage of languages spoken, of food that emanated from there, of rituals and practices that may no longer exist but existed way back when. It is important to document all of this, of costumes worn, of plants that were planted, of everything surrounding the edifices that are now standing, or maybe not even those which are present today. So it's really going to be a very important piece of legislation that can be a model for other areas, not just of the metropolis, but other provinces as well, that have areas that need to be conserved, preserved, protected, and documented. And I want this, hopefully, to be model legislation, just like what we need to do for Santa Ana, for Escolta, for Malate, for Manila, and many other areas in the country.
Thank you, Senator. Kong Chua, what does it mean? Yung meaning, yung actual parang technical or concrete effects of that Heritage Zone Declaration to the Quiapo community? Like, ano yung specific ways that it will affect?
Well, first of all, Pia, Quiapo is everything to me. It means a lot to me. Why? Because I was born, I was raised, and I live here in Quiapo. So this is actually not only my district, but this is my area of residence. So talagang dito na ako lumaki. So the reason why I've been pushing for this heritage, because through the years I've seen Quiapo deteriorated. So a lot of misconception about Quiapo nowadays. When you talk about Quiapo, what do you have in mind? Pickpocketers, drugs, DVD, mga herbal medicines and things like that. But Quiapo is not only, it is more than this. Quiapo is a very big part of our history. We have these streets of Hidalgo, where a lot of houses are, very historical. It used to house the I think one of the cabinets during the time of Aguinaldo, si Pedro Paterno. So not only that, Quiapo is where you will see the two big basilicas, the Basilica of San Sebastian and the Quiapo Basilica, and we also house the Golden Moss. So if you will check at Quiapo, if you will take a look at Quiapo, it's a melting pot. So iba-iba, may Muslim, you have Chinese, you have Spanish, you have Philippine. So maraming ganap dito sa Quiapo. But through the years, as this is my first term, so I want to develop this area. I want to preserve history. I want to preserve what is left. Diba? So we also have the Nakpil. The Bahay Nakpil, diba? That is where the Gregoria de Jesus used to live. So maraming historical value, and this whole street of Hidalgo, it used to house middle class, upper middle class Filipino. Why? Because of its close proximity to church, to market, to University Belt, and to Malacanang. So very strategic.
Sorry, if I may, ano po yung ibig sabihin ng Heritage Zone Declaration? Like, how will a Heritage Zone Declaration differ from the current status quo? Like, what's the difference?
Because it will help us preserve these places. Like if you will check the old houses, medyo talagang makikita mo napabayaan na talaga eh. Maybe because the owners, the heirs of the former owners, they could no longer afford the preservation of these structures. In fact, the Zamora house, it was already sold. So, medyo nanganganib na yung mga ibang little by little, nawawala na yung atong mga heritage na sinasabi natin. And sooner or later, I will not be surprised. Itong mga paterno, mga things like, ano na rin yan. Yes. So, it is very important that we declare this so that, the national government will be able to infuse infrastructure projects, develop the area, to preserve history.
Yeah.
In the bills po that I read, there will be a conservation management plan. It's supposed to be administered by the Manila city government kasi sila yung LGU in that area. Tapos there should be support from national agencies, but really it's Manila-led, it's LGU-led. So can you just explain, how is this different? How is the mechanics of this declaration different from, let's say, Intramuros, which is now managed by a national agency? And what kind of support can the community expect kung may ganitong heritage zone declaration?
Well, basically, sa Intramuros, because that is a national, run by the national government. So, ang nagagawa lang ng Manila is to pick up garbage. So other than that, wala na kaming
basic services.
Basic services na kumbaga, we have no power to, to restrict
City Hall,
in City Hall, di ba? So yun lang ang parang nagiging namin eh. And there are always nagkakaroon ng conflict between the Intramuros administration and the local government kasi may mga policies, may mga na gustong paggawa ng City Hall na which is not does not or is not in align with the IA. So medyo mahirap. Unlike pag dito kasi because the City of Manila, under the leadership of Mayor Rahani, we are into heritage. So nakikita ko naman, they're very active. So, and under my law, under my bill, there is a need for the City Council to pass certain provisions. Kasi pag sa local ka, nakikita mo yung change. Nagbabago yung panahon eh. So, hindi tayo po pwede kasi when you're national, ang tingin mo yung pangkalahatan eh. So, unlike kung sa Manila ka, sa local ka, nakikita mo yung need ng pagbabago. And it will be easier on our part to amend ordinances. Like for example, the restrictions. Diba? Unlike if it is national, it has to pass through Congress, Senate. So medyo yung mga restrictions, baka mamaya, pag-iiwanan na yung community, yun ang magiging problema natin.
So let's turn naman our attention to yung concerns of communities that could be affected by such heritage zone declarations. For Stephen and Robby, what do you expect would be the impact of this heritage zone declaration? For example, muna for Quiapo, right? Parang ano yung maging effect on communities? What is your stance on it? Do you support this heritage zone declaration bill?
In itself, kasi we are aware about its historical significance. Now, not everybody within the community would be aware that it really has to be put out there that there's an enacting law that really preserves all these assets. So, it's also one way for them to be aware and to be also in the same page as the government na, okay, we need to respect the law insofar as heritage conservation laws out there are concerned. And at the same time, if they also, as we believe na community is the cultural bearer, for sure, they would be able to also manifest in their own ways of life, yung culture as how it manifests in their daily living. So, that's, as Sen. Loren mentioned, yung intangible heritage, sila yung cultural bearers doon. So, pag merong ganong klaseng mechanism that we will be able to enact these laws, and ordinances even, at least aware sila, there's a consciousness at the level of the community that we need to be all in this together, and preserving all these assets, tangible and intangible heritage, and even develop them for the future. Kasi again, the essence of heritage is really pass it on to the next generation.
Yeah.
So,
Robby?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say so. Right now, it's like there's a lot of, perhaps, especially in the Escolta district, people are quite lax at their pace, the speed that they want to accomplish things. Not so much of the, especially now that we're kind of, a lot of the time we're being taken over by a lot of like mainland Chinese are buying a lot of land in that area, which is actually one of my primary concerns, at least because I want to be able to communicate the importance of that zone to them before they make their own personal plans. Hopefully, it really means because the whole district ties me to my grandfather. So to some degree, it's something that I very much like. I think just declaring that area as a heritage zone in itself is also maybe perhaps some sense of recognition for the people who've passed before us already. Ayan na rin yung talagang pinaka-importante, because it's something that this country, I feel like, really needs at this point in time, is some sense of pride. And just adding these heritage zones does add that to a very deep degree.
In First United Building, because Robby is part owner, their family's part owner of the building, and we have seen talaga how Escolta has decayed through the years, but through the efforts of your family, diba? There's like this one spot in Escolta that's become really vibrant, it's really attracted the new generation, and parang naging hip na naman yung Escolta from private sector kind of efforts. So, can you just explain to us, siguro, like in relation to Quiapo and other heritage zones, parang what would be the danger if we let things just run its course? What dangers do you see now in Escolta? Like, what is preventing you from making the whole street vibrant? And what do you think is the support you need, like the private sector, the building owners need to keep that going?
Yeah. I think the scariest part, for the most part, if we just keep things going as they are, is a lot of owners have kind of given up on their buildings and their properties in that area. I'll give you maybe an example of this is maybe like the Puyat building, which is corner Escolta and Burke. That building has over 200 people to its name. Like the owners never sought to really sort out, and it's completely dilapidated. It's like maybe, I don't know who we speak to bring up those murals, but that's the most that we can do with that building at that point. We just put up street level murals on there because we can't use the building for anything. We don't even really know who to talk to when we're dealing with that. So that's the issue at this point, is that when people think about the future coming down the line, when you know that there's a future to be had, it's very important to be able to sort that out for the next generation of people, and to give it as a gift to the next generation. And when you give it as a gift, you want it to be like properly presented, properly prepared, properly thought of in ways that the next generation can work with. So that's the big thing, is not like leaving things as is right now without any sense of importance, with a sense that it is. I mean, we try to hold up our end of the bargain because we feel accountable to this country and to its people. We want to make it better. We created the vibrant community that we have now because we thought, for instance, at first we really thought like what was lacking in the Philippines to some degree. It's maybe like a very deep arts district. Let's start that within our building and see what we can do within our control. So, it all started out from that, but it also started with like trusting people who loved the area, who walked through it and felt its magic in one way or another. Yan talaga, that's the really important part. And I think we are just trying, like my main concentration for now, and my family's main concentration for now, is focusing on ourselves so that hopefully we can inspire other buildings in the neighborhood to adopt the same approach. And Stephen has been very helpful in trying to introduce me to the other building owners na rin. I get that. Kasi bago pa rin ako dito, pero it's good na we can get started in this momentum. But yeah.
How do you think the government can help in motivating building owners to preserve their historic buildings?
So actually, until recently, we used to have like a real estate, my real estate tax relief kami. I think it amounted to about 2.5 million, and what we would use all of that to modernize the building. So stuff like things like internet-wide account. Because a lot of buildings in Escolta don't even have the money to install internet across all their floors. For instance, we're one of the first ones in that neighborhood, I believe, to install a fiber network throughout the building. So that's what all the tax incentives went towards talaga. I don't know if I can say this, but my dad, for the most part talaga, it's like, if you think about the struggle between kind of maintaining a heritage building and the private burden of supporting all these people. Because, you start to see na the people who take over your building, they have families, and you want them to succeed to some degree. And you feel the weight of wanting to succeed for their sake or set them up for success, because it's not just that tenant you're helping, it's their family, maybe their larger family, their bigger family at large. So when we see that my dad puts in his own money, Minsan, just to maintain the building and all that. But so that's really like the crux of what we're going for now. It's like any little bit of help on that end, especially with the tax leak. But I have to say, it's like, I can't necessarily speak for the other building owners, but as I said, for us, that wasn't even something we realized we needed until it happened, until it came to us. And really, the only other building I think in the neighborhood that also has is the Calvo building.
Yeah.
And we've not really gotten into talks, because that was the issue that about like the culture. There's a certain fear with the city council na parang, if you're not, we were like, okay, we are a heritage building, but are we complete heritage? Parang we're gaslighting ourselves pa on, is this true? Do we deserve this? Should we, and all that? But it's like, I don't know, like my angle on this, if you use it for the right things, it will come up well. But there has to be, of course, like an incentive structure. We need to have like accountability, checks and balances to actually see that money does end up towards the building's renovation. So I don't know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a tax. It can just be the expenditure you do, and then afterward, I don't know, I think it's like a middle ground thing. Now you can expense it afterwards.
Aside from the relief, because I also read it in the bills you've proposed, the relief from real estate tax. Are there other incentive structures in your bills that would motivate private sector to help government in preserving buildings they own which are historical?
Well, in the House version that we passed, that is the only relief, the tax exemption for real property tax. Yun lang yung naisama namin. But of course, that is not the only, I would say, na advantage that we're giving to the owner. Kasi, like for example, for what he said, 2.5 million.
Yeah.
Di ang malaking relief talaga 'yon. That is not barya, di ba? So I would say na for now, yun muna yung tinitingnan namin, and hopefully if we could kasi like for example in my version, di ba? We have pinpointed several properties. Diba? So that's why I only mention only one street, the Hidalgo, because that is very historical. So kaya yun lang muna. So baka mamaya if we will include other streets, baka mamaya dumami yung mga bahay, they will also avail of the considering na hindi naman sila. So we will see.
It has to be.
And usually kasi yung tax incentives are the parang first step talaga to encourage people to let them be part of this journey to preserve these places. Although going beyond that, para kasing even if NHEP and NCCA, they also have the power to declare heritage zones, and in their guidelines, they could provide beyond the tax incentives, mga technical assistances to make sure that, for example, in terms of maintaining a certain look of a place, they would be the ones in charge of like the technical expertise to make sure everything is in place. So yung architectural guidelines, yung design standards, yung mga ganun. So it's a matter of really upon enacting all these measures na ma-encourage natin yung mga building owners and even community members to be part of this journey. Na okay, I think we need to observe certain measures, but at the same time, looking at these things as a potential talaga. Not just a restriction, but more as a potential that these assets are something that we could work together para, let's say, in potentials like for tourism, for the development of the community, better outlook in terms of basic services, and even basic things like yung provision of street signages, for example. It has a certain look na parang in accordance with the character of the place, we need to keep certain designs in relation to its historical value and cultural value. So these are some examples that we could work on by just the fact na we are putting or designating certain places or certain neighborhoods as a heritage zone. So, of course, on the other hand, the community themselves, in terms of cultural mapping, parang they would also be encouraged na sila mismo yung speak up in terms of, these are our heritage, these are our stories. We compile them together. And then in these measures, we make sure that, again, they will be part of that measure and journey na mas magiging meaningful yung heritage zone basta mapaintindi lang sa mga tao na importante siya. Hindi siya restricting. Pero actually it's an opportunity for them to give a different outlook and a better outlook at that in terms of their neighborhoods, and they would have that sense of pride of place.
But we also have to be careful.
Senator?
If I may, yes. Since Pia asked about what are the incentives once it's enacted into law, take note that what we are declaring are not just private houses which have to be spent for by the private individuals, but also perhaps streets and landmarks which are public property. And when it is public property, we in the national government, both houses of Congress, can actually allocate support, financial assistance through the National Commission on Culture and Arts, through the National Historical Commission, and other agencies of government, through the TIEZA, through the Department of Tourism, just as basic as cleaning the streets to make sure that the esteros are clean, to ensure that garbage is collected in accordance with Republic Act 9003, which is a segregation of waste at source, recycling, and composting. Just clearing the streets is half the battle won. Second, just lighting the streets, not those gaudy lamp lights, which some LGUs purchase, but something that is in accordance with the heritage of the place.
Correct.
Third, it was mentioned, the cultural mapping law, so close to my heart, recently enacted, my 20-year-old bill enacted into law. It cost millions to culturally, historically map an area. But the private individuals, let's say First United, we have the part owner here and many more, you don't have to spend. I would want to do for free for you culture mapping of Escolta, specifying your building. That's my gift to the community. I'd like to do that. And it will not be on the expense of the owner of the private structure. Now, the Quiapo Church, the Minor Basilica of the Black Nazarene, the Minor Basilica of San Sebastian, and many of these, Calle Hidalgo, all of these are public infrastructure. They will be and can be and should be supported by national government funds, the DPWH, if it's drainage, MMDA, TIEZA, DOT, NCCA, we can all do that. A congressman can amend the budget when it comes to his district. A senator can amend any government agency's budget to enhance it for a specific purpose, especially if this is enacted into law. And so the real property exemption or rebates or even incentives insofar as taxation is concerned, that's important. Malaking bawas yan. But it is not the only incentive because there are other monetary and non-monetary incentives, as I mentioned, that other cultural agencies of government, and I have been doing that in many parts of the country. It doesn't have to be you give them money so they preserve. No, it is really first a greater understanding of how heritage will make the community more economically sustainable. Pag malinis tayo at pag iparating natin ang kalinisan, ang kasaranlan, ang kasaysayan ng ating lugar, dadami ang pupunta rito. Hindi mang dayuhang turista sa Pilipinas, maganda na. Social media tutulong para makita, ito pala yon, ito palang ibig sabihin nun. May nakikita akong poste, linisin at ipaliwanag kung anong ibig sabihin ng poste yun. Dito pala nagsimula yung ganito. Yung mga hindi akalain, may kamulatan na ngayon. So lahat ito put together. So it's really a concerted effort. It's not just one agency of government. It is the national government that will provide the funding. And my bill in the Senate empowers the city government that must have the conservation plan. So it will be the national and the local government as well. And of course, the private sector. Without the cooperation of the local community, no matter what legislation we do, we will not be able to conserve and protect the place. So I'm glad that we have those in the private sector who are conserving their own structures, buildings or homes in their own limited capacity. And we are here to support. I've done that. If I may just set an example. There was the only standing stone house, Balay nga Bato, in Antique, dilapidated for the longest time. And I could not fund it because it was privately owned until a MOA use of rock agreement was done with the provincial government, and eventually I funded it to the National Historical Commission. And now it's a beautiful, restored, the only standing Balay nga Bato in my province in the capital town. For example, Patnongon ruins for longest time just ruins, but it has historical value, and now the National Historical Commission is restoring it with funds I allocated through the NHCP. We have the power of the purse. We must use the power of the purse to conserve what is remaining of our heritage. And as I said, it is not just built heritage. While built heritage is visual, easier to understand, there's so much of intangible heritage that we need to revive. Whether it's enterprises before, it's languages, it's music, it's rituals, it's practices, it's prayers, it's clothing, so much intangible heritage. May I mention, it may not be relevant to Quiapo, but talking about intangible heritage, congratulations to many of those who submitted the Hinilawod epics and chants of in our region, in Panay, in Iloilo. It's been recently inscribed in UNESCO, the Hinilawod epic chant. That is an example of intangible heritage. I would like to do culture mapping, and I will soon, of Quiapo, of this area. I'm certain there are prayers and chants that will come out as part of our cultural mapping. And this is part of the wealth of the community and the history of our nation.
Senator, you mentioned nga the economic development na actually dapat part siya ng argument for declaring or protecting heritage zones. In the course of you writing your bills, have you ever come across statistics that maybe even in other countries that prove that heritage zone protection or any form of investment in heritage buildings or even intangible heritage has led to economic development? Kasi baka pwede siyang argument for like even private sector to start pouring more investment into this kind of thing.
Take a look at vegan. Diba? So, could you imagine the tourism and the economic benefit that it has generated through the years? And aside from that, nakakapagbigay ng mga trabaho dun sa people surrounding the area. So, that is what our intention dito in passing this bill also. Because aside from the fact na sinasabi ni Senator Loren Legarda, mga intangible, what is in danger now in our area is San Sebastian Church. Medyo rusty na to. And this church is very significant in our area. In fact, more than century na yung na ito. So, but through the years, kinalawang na, makikita mo medyo nakakatakot na, diba? So, could you imagine this? So, with the passing of this law, we will be able to help save San Sebastian.
We should and we will.
Yes, ma'am, with your help. Thank
Yes.
you.
If I may, it's of course San Sebastian. We have Plaza del Carmen, Plaza Miranda, Quinta Market, Nacpil Bautista House, Paterno House, Zamora House, Estrella House, Henato House, Zaragoza House, Casa Consulado, Ocampo Santiago House, Ocampo Pagoda Mansion, Padilla Art Gallery, Casa Boix, La Trista Site, Calle Hidalgo, Carle Elegui, Calle Bautista, Calle Bilibid Viejo, Calle de Guzman, Globo de Oro. So much I can go on and on of so many areas, and this is just one district of our country. There's so much to preserve because we are actually a beautiful nation. We just keep on destroying it because of ignorance and lack of support, but we are here to help preserve it.
So speaking of yung nga, parang opposition to the bill would likely be due to restrictions, right? Like that's what I'm hearing. Na parang yung worries about a heritage zone declaration is how it will limit people's movement, what people can do with their buildings. How do you assuage those concerns? Like especially for certain building owners who might even shy away from a zone declaration kasi feel nila, di na kami makapag-renovate in the way we want to, or we'll have to spend so much more for this and that. We won't be able to be as free, or even people in that heritage zone. Meron po ba mga restrictions that hindi pwede gawin sa heritage zone pero pwede sa labas? Can you just elaborate on if there are possible prohibitions that would apply to the heritage zone versus outside it?
Well, that is primarily the reason why the city government of Manila should enact an ordinance para medyo yung restrictions mas madali nating maiayos, unlike if it's national government. Alam mo naman medyo ang tagal di ba? So, but yes, you're correct because that will be the concern of the property owners. But yung restrictions naman po pwede naman in certain areas, mahigpit, but in certain areas, medyo lalagyan natin ng konting leeway. So, that is the beauty of this, no? So, but of course, may mga non-negotiable talaga dyan. Like for example, if you're going to build property, siguro yung facade, it should be like this or like that. May mga ganong restrictions. I don't think that there will be problems when it comes to facade, di ba? Ang magiging problema dyan is yung height limit. So, as you can see, medyo limited ang space in the city of Manila. So, wala ka nang mabibili dito ng mga malalaking properties. So, kaya as much as possible, property owners are trying to maximize yung property nila. Talagang vertical na talaga ngayon. Wala na ngayong horizontal development. So, yun ang magiging problema. That's why in the House version, we try to limit the street. Just the street of Hidalgo. So, kasi yun nga, because of the tax incentives that we're going to provide, the question is, if we're going to, let's say, declare certain streets, diba, in Quiapo, let's say 4 or 5 streets in Quiapo, like the Bilibid Viejo, the Arlegue, the De Guzman, diba? So, may include ba all the property owners in the street, in yung mga property owners dito sa mga streets na to, to avail of the tax incentives? Baka mamaya, they will do it just to, you know, para makatakas lang, to avoid paying taxes. So, we do not want to, to abuse, diba, these incentives. Kaya nga, we will try to, as much as possible, pag-aaralan natin, the good Senator Loren Legarda, has created a technical working group. Siguro in this technical working group, we will be able to polish everything. We will be able to enhance. And sabi natin lahat yung mga concerns natin. And of course, during the technical working group, we will be inviting all the stakeholders, the local government, the property owners. Kasi in my district alone, we have so many areas that could be declared as heritage zone. Ito ano lang to panimula ko lang to Escolta is part of my district. Binondo is part of my district. Santa Cruz is part of my district. So lahat yan may historical significance. San Nicolas is part of my district. So talagang if you go there, we have properties more than 50, 100 years old. So medyo baka mamaya wala na kami makolekta na real property tax in the end. Yung district ko po, my district is contributing more than half of the city income. Kasi nandun din ang Binondo More than half of the city income is coming from my district. So yan ang pinaka So we'll see. But of course, with the guidance of the good senator, kasi mas experiencado si Senator Legarda when it comes to this, matutulungan tayo ni Senator Legarda.
I think may fear din kasi...
I hear you, Congressman Chua. Yes, perhaps what you could give us would be all the possible heritage areas in your district. We stick to that first, no? We one step at a time, and we select an area where people are more willing to be part of a declaration of a heritage zone. We will not impose if people don't like, because there has to be stakeholder participation. And then we see, once an area has been declared and they see how beautiful and how sustainable and economically feasible it has been, the others would want to be declared eventually. So I'm open to revisions, amendments, because that's the process of legislation. But since the House version has tax incentives, we need to consult, of course, with the DOF, even if the tax incentive in the House version is by local provision. But it will affect, of course, the collection of the city government. We have to refer it to the Ways and Means Committee. That's a process of legislation, masilimuot pero exciting, because pag ito'y magawa natin, maraming mga areas sa Pilipinas. Let's say Taal ng Batangas, napakaganda. Kung hindi pa to na-deklara na heritage area, ay sayang kasi ang gaganda ng mga lumang bahay din doon. Napakarami. Vegan, of course, that's already declared by UNESCO. But there's so much still to do.
Many of the districts you mentioned, they're actually characterized also by the kind of energy they have na iba't ibang communities live there. Sabi niya nga po, melting pot siya. There are lots of vendors, but that's how we associate these districts. So may fear rin kasi that, when you go abroad, there's some heritage districts that become kind of like very sanitized and parang hindi na siya living, parang siyang naging preserved in this time. So is there a way we can, parang na siya, parang mall or halos wala na yung vibrancy because there are too many restrictions. How do we ensure that this kind of heritage zone declarations we're gunning for also preserve the kind of vibrancy that we've seen currently, the fact na, diba, for example, vendors, will vendors be prohibited in Quiapo in future, or will we retain that kind of aspect of Quiapo?
Well, actually, that is a good question, because right now I'm in the process of developing this area. There will be infrastructure projects that will commence this year and next year. So, like for example, the Calle Hidalgo, lalagyan natin itong parang cobblestone. So, this Plaza del Carmen, we have designed para siya sa Las Casas. Some things like that. So, part of the design is yung mga vendors. Where are we going to put these people? So, nag-design kami ng mga cart na medyo maganda. Tapos, doon natin ilalagay yung mga nagtitinda sa kalye. So, I will give them a nice cart na akma dito sa areang to. So, and of course, as a district congressman, I will be providing them with uniforms na medyo historical at to attract tourists. In fact, in my design, may pinadesign, nilaglagay pa kami doon ng mga toilet para sa mga tourists. May pambabae, may panlalaki, and there is a local tourism information center. So may mga ganon. Merong pang museum para maano nila yung history nitong area to. So that is para magiging part siya ng walking tour.
Yeah.
Pero that includes the people surrounding the area.
Yeah.
I see. So, sir, this project, though, you're mentioning, it's not tied to the heritage zone. You're enacting that, you're doing that even before.
Sinisimulan ko na to.
Okay.
Sinisimulan ko na to. And in fact, I talked to Secretary Acosar already and discussed my plan because I think he is the owner of one of the big
Kasi Quiapo stakeholder
property
siya.
in Hidalgo. So I showed him yung plan, yung development plan that that we designed.
Yeah.
So sabi ko, if possible, yung malaking property dyan, yung MLQU nila, no? Mag-put up siya ng something na po pwedeng makatulong sa mga tao rin in the community. Like siguro food truck or something like that na po pwede rin to attract. And like for example, yung Globo de Oro. Yung Globo de Oro ay naglagay na ako diyan ng infrastructure project.
For the prayers of the Muslims.
We will be inaugurating it maybe in June, no, with the mayor. But the plan is, the design, parang dinesign ko siya na parang ang nasa Mindanao. So, yung infrastructure project. And I want to, I talk with Congressman Olazo of Zamboanga. So, because we wanted to propagate or to sell mga goods doon na galing sa sa Mindanao. So para at least pag nandoon ka talaga sa Muslim areas namin, feel mo talaga na para ka ring nasa Mindanao.
Muslim town.
Yes, Muslim town. So natin pinopromote natin to little by little.
For me naman, it's very important yung kind of, the essence of stakeholders' participation para to make sure na kung ano man yung developments in the area, properly consulted with the community, and also kung ano yung inputs nila, especially in implementing these projects, is to make sure that it also represents their aspirations or their values. So in this case, knowing that Quiapo is a melting pot indeed, like Christians and Muslims do converge in the area. So for example, in the Muslim town section of Quiapo, there are different not indigenous but cultural communities in that area. So Muslim communities ito. So ano yung nagre-represent dun sa kanilang character, sa kanilang cultures and practices, importante na naisasama yon sa planning. And yung actual execution would also represent what they really want. As a moving forward na, of course, there are status quos nga. Na ito yung situation, siguro baka yung tingin ng mga tao, hindi siya ganun kaaya-aya tingnan kasi nga parang medyo magulo, ganyan. Pero I think kung mas maintindihan sa level nila at naintindihan din ng government as they implement the project na ito rin yung gusto ng community, I think yung meeting halfway doon, yung actual execution job would be something that that's really parang agreeable on both sides. So for Quiapo, that would be an exciting thing pag meron ng mga project like that. For as long as, again, it also represents the aspirations and yung mismong nila, yung mismong cultures nila as parang showcase in those projects.
So these designs, Congressman, were you able to talk to communities rin about those projects?
Yeah, they're very excited and they're looking forward to see it. In fact, when I, after the perspective, nagpatawag ako dun sa area, including the chairman, the barangay officials, I show it to them. Excited silang lahat. So, kaya nga, eto na lang, this is the missing piece.
That's why parang benchmark yun eh. Pag declaring these areas as a heritage zone, parang talaga yung community would take part of these efforts. And yung also a benchmark thing na it's the national government through measures like the bills, you would be the ones enacting these as a heritage zone. In contrast with another approach, which is the NHCP or NCCA issuing a resolution to declare these as a heritage zone. So at least coming from the community, like Congressman Chua as representing the 3rd District, would be siya yung nag-enact ng law for Quiapo. And maybe in some other time, yung Escolta naman would be considered. At least, talagang may nagsasabing it's about time because it's long overdue anyway, knowing the historical significance of these places.
So, Robby, given that Escolta Binondo declaration is in the works,
Yeah.
right? What is your wish list as part of the community?
I know. I mean, for the most part, it's like we don't necessarily want to revive it once more as another commercial district. We're really trying to look at what's missing in the Philippines, and I don't know, maybe it's more of a personal thing, but I would love it if Escolta ended up reviving as an arts district, the new arts district in the Philippines. You know, because it's already there for the most part, at least in our building. You know, lots of trailblazers, people, you know, like Art Serrano, Jordan Aguilon, you know, Gab Villegas, si Leroy New, all of them really taking part in that community. It's been a wonderful, yeah. And I don't know, it's like I love going to work every day and working with these people. And that's one of the things I love, is that I want people to feel this excitement that you know, it's a great, you know, and you know, at the end of the day, activating these places like a heritage zone, we don't, even as building owners, we don't necessarily see this. We do see this as like, it's just a stepping stone naman towards like a greater understanding of, it's a greater understanding of, it's a way that we can turn the page that we're all on the same one. Tipong ganun. Like it would serve as a platform for instance, all of the building owners to actually talk together and move in one direction. Because they'll be like, okay, there's this huge page. They're on the page. We're all on the same page nationally, local government. Now it's our time to move forward as well. You know, right now it's like, it's always been the matter of like, kanya-kanya lang, whoever wants to work on their own thing, work on their own thing muna. And, you know, Stephen and I were saying, earlier na parang, you know, minsan it's like we do a lot of these meetings with each other, but more or less they're just formality, like meetings between a lot of the other building owners. Usually gets reduced to like formalities for the most part, but we wine and dine with each other, but we don't really have there's never usually like a full plan moving forward, because there's uncertainty. That's the biggest thing with a lot of building owners. We wonder, it's like, what are our guarantees? What can we work with? What do we know that we have in our pockets? And that's the one thing, like having that on our end, and it would actually like bring out a lot of bravery from people. I mean, I think it's our building talaga that's really trying to push it forward, regardless of what happens. But I can like gladly say, because of all these activations we've been having lately, these collaborations, we're close to full available capacity in the building for the first time, and since my parents took over, maybe in the 90s. And that back then, you remember the state of heritage buildings back then is like tenants didn't even care. So you'd have tenants who were there, but they weren't paying electricity, they weren't paying rent, and stuff like that. So, you know, you go from that state in the 1990s to what it is now. And for me, it's like, I can't help but want to see this for the rest of the other buildings in Escolta, for the rest of Quiapo, you know, for the rest of Manila and greater. Because these things are important, because they remind the next generation that there were people that came before them, and there's a legacy that they can fight for, that they can continue, that they can build on top of. So that's what's so important.
But it's definitely value adding.
Yeah,
You know,
that's the biggest.
if you know Escolta and even Quiapo as a business zone or business area, parang it's in its status quo as is business area, business area. Pero pag halimbawa, intindihan nila, kailangan linisin natin yung place, kailangan i-impose natin itong mga certain measures na to because kailangan ba dahil just for basic services? Hindi. Kasi makasaysayan siya, importante siya. So I think yun yung kailangan natin i-put forward dito sa mga places na to. And then na-encourage yun yung mga owners na upon knowing na, there's actually a value in my heritage na for the longest time, I'm not even actually giving a damn on these things. Pero eventually, upon knowing na, Padilla Art Gallery, for example, or Ocampo Pagoda, usually dormitory lang namin yun eh. Pero yun pala yung kwento ng bahay na yun. Mas na-empower yung mga tao and eventually taking part dun sa actual process na, sige, tutulong din kaming maging part nito. And actually may ambag kami, I think inputs pa namin, para makatulong din in terms of yung stakeholders' participation, concerted effort siya. I think at the level of Escolta, upon seeing how they do things, usually they just talk about things and they have their aspirations. It's always there. It's just that paano naman tutulong yung government about it? I think nandun wala pa yung talagang convergence so far.
Meld
So I think the very beauty of having a heritage zone measures in these places would really fill in those gaps eventually para maging mas maging solid na yung collaboration and even programmings na alam nating much needed for these places. So, diba, kailangan bang linisin lang dahil sa basura? Ay, kailangan ilawan yan kasi makasaysayan yung place na yun, i-value yung place na yun. And parang even, for example, the typical realities on the ground, basura, traffic, even vagrants all over, masusolusyonan yun kasi parang yung value na napapasok dun sa lugar na yun, mas naintindihan ng mga tao na kailangan siyang gawin. Kasi nandun yung significance ng places na yun. So.
Siguro my last few questions with this interview would be about cultural mapping kasi in the end, yun naman yung pinaka-start niya. Like, we cannot declare a place as historic if we do not recognize it as such. So I really wanted to ask, especially Senator Legarda, who was behind yung cultural mapping law, what have been the challenges in implementing this? Because it says in the law that LGUs have to be the one taking the lead in mapping the heritage in their area. But I've heard from many people that not all LGUs allot the right resources for this. Like minsan, di ba, yung one person doubles as tourism officer, doubles as this, siya yung in charge sa mapping, but wala siyang support. So, hindi niya nagagawa yung cultural mapping for his district, his or her city. So, what have been the challenges to this law? And where do you think support can come in? How can we better implement this law?
Number one, it's a new law. Although I filed it 20 years ago. Salamat sa kamulatan ng mga tao ngayon na naintindihan na ang ibig ko sabihin nung ako'y bata pang senador. Pangalawa, just to correct that it has to be the LGU because I'm doing it nationally in coordination with the cultural agencies and with local governments. Maski ayaw ng LGU, kaya natin gumawa ng culture mapping, basta sasabihin natin sa kanila, kami magabayad, wala kayong gagastusin. If there is no prioritization by the LGU because of limited resources and lack of knowledge or care for culture and history, we can help. The National Commission on Culture can help. The National Historical Commission, the National Museum can help. And I can even help the private sector, NGOs, people's organizations. And we don't just do cities or urban areas, but even, let's say, culture mapping ng ating karagatan, kapatagan, ng ating protected area sa kabundukan. Ano ang kahalaga ng culture mapping? Ito ang basehan ng ating dapat protektuhan, i-document, pahalagahan, at i-adaptive reuse at bigyan ng kahalagan at pondo. How can we treasure what we do not measure? How can we protect what we do not know exists? So, hubarin natin sa atin yung tibag mentality. Luma na yan, demolish. Tama na po yan, ang dami ng pagkakamali sa daming syudad. Even Manila has lost so much of its grandeur, of its past, of its history, because without naming names, it's been destroyed by people. Hinayaan. Dahil walang batas ngayon. But because of the National Heritage Act, 2009, I was co-author of that, and the late Senator Edangara was a principal author. 50 years and above, bawal. Kailangan ipaalam sa NCCA. Tapos yung gawa ng national artist, bawal din tibagin. So tama na yung tibag mentality. Tama na rin yung ating mentality na kailangan lahat makintab, lahat bago, at lahat ay malaki. Hindi po.
Okay. Sorry, Senator, si Stephen lang has a word to say also.
Mahaba na.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead, Stephen. Sige.
I like to add to that what Senator Loren is saying. Sakto kasi yun. Kasi alam ba, as we are able to, again, identify and eventually use these as assets for the community. And knowing na Quiapo, Escolta, all these places are still in its essence, business areas pa rin. Minsan ang takot ng mga tao, okay, baka is it really restricting? Para na ako makapag-develop vertically, for example. Yun yung mga practical na mga questions. I think by designating these as a heritage zone, that's very important. Knowing that these places are important, yung ma-attract mo din ng mga stakeholders, mga developers in these places. Parang ang dapat prerequisite sa kanila, will you also be taking part in the journey na ma-make sure na makikip natin yung character, yung historical significance ng place na yun. Kasi kung hindi, maybe hanap ka na lang ng ibang place kasi ka pwede mag Pero I think yun din at least it's also a potential na what if baka marami talagang developers out there na would be investing in these places upon knowing that that's a heritage place, ay, mag-i-invest ako dyan. At for sure, paniwalaan natin na meron mga talagang developers and stakeholders out there that will be willing to invest. Just at least yung mismong national government natin and even stakeholders na magsasabing, okay, na-declared na siya, sige, mag-take part kami dyan. I think doon natin siya ipapasok. So lahat nung, okay, we need to cultural map all these places. O may mga investors, sige, we will also be willing to invest on that. Kasi alam namin heritage zone siya. So halimbawa kung vertically, kung kailangan pa rin, again, certain places naman, hindi kailangan restricting. Okay, in certain core areas of the Escolta and Quiapo districts, kailangan well-preserved. Maybe in some places, alam nating part of the buffer zone siya, pero at least sana man lang ma-maintain yung character ng place. Kasi knowing we've already culturally mapped the asset, the intangible and tangible heritages of these places, kailangan ma-ensure lang natin intact siya. So yung dun sa buffer zone, sige mag-vertically develop ka, pero yung character ba, yung design ba ng structure mo would still be conforming with the character and the beauty of the place. I think yan yung pinaka-essence of the reason why we want to designate this as a heritage zone. Kasi much as Senator Loren had mentioned, much had been destroyed. And moving forward, I guess by designating these as heritage zones, baka the best of the city is yet to come. If we would put this together as parang, okay, ito yung kailangan natin gawin ngayon kasi urgently kailangan siyang gawin. Pero yung effect nun sa mga next generation, the very essence of heritage itself, is mas empowering sila sa next generation. So,
as much as I'd like to keep this interview going, we have to wrap up. But I just really want to hear, lastly, from Kong Chua and Robby, since kayo po, you're saying that you want to plan for future heritage zones in other districts. How can stakeholders take part in that? Parang ano yung way that they can be linked to your office or even Manila City Hall para mas may consultation? And Robby, is that something that you think Escolta building owners want to take part in, and what are their concerns with that? Sige, Kong Chua first.
Well, actually, when I filed this bill, talaga namang we invited stakeholders already. In fact, those who lobbied for this are property owners of this area. That's why we limit it to Hidalgo. So, but of course, when we proceed with the technical working group, I understand that the need to invite again for these stakeholders. No? And another thing, if we will start after the passing of this bill, when this bill has become a law, pag nag-put up na ng development plan, there is a need again to invite stakeholders. So, and I also agree with Senator Legarda na talaga namang yung mapping hindi naman ito solely sa discretion ng LGU. In fact, coordination with the national government and civil society. Yan po yung mga important features na itong law na to. Kaya walang maiiwan. Everything, everybody will be included. So, yun.
I mean, for the most part, well, we're completely on board. We have been very much hoping for for the most part, then it's like, as I said, it's like just to be able to be here, gather together, and know that there is a platform coming up for greater action on that scale is better. I mean, it really inspires me. It makes, really definitely motivates me to get things done quicker for the most part. But I think one thing that we could do pa nga in the future, diba, is like we incorporate, since we have all of our working tours, incorporate mo na rin that na Escolta walking tour with Quiapo and all of that bit. And because it really is, like as much as I talk about Escolta, it's not necessarily just Escolta, it's really Manila at large.
It's Manila,
Yeah. It's all, and it's the rest of the Philippines to a greater scale. Talaga, because that's what we really need as a country. And you try to do everything like that you have control over naman. But if anything you need naman, Congressman, you know, you can let me know na, you should come and visit the building na rin soon. Yeah.
So thank you so much for that rich discussion. Thank you again for joining us. So, you know, we will continue to cover this issue. Heritage is a big part of a movement we have in Rappler called Make Manila Livable. It's a way for us to, it's basically a collaboration between Rappler journalists and communities to make quality of life in Philippine cities a key election issue. Because next year's elections, we're electing new mayors, senators, congressmen. So we really want to make livability and preserving heritage a part of, you know, the election landscape. Like, we want to know what our leaders or future leaders have planned for this issue. So the conversation will continue. We can, if any of our viewers also want to ask our resource persons or me about the interview that we had just now, you can download our app if you haven't yet. It's called the Rappler Communities app, and we have a chat room there called Livable Cities, and this is where all of Rappler audience concerned about livability and heritage conservation, yung commuting issues, everything, we discuss it in that chat room. So please do download and join that chat room. You can tag me at Pia Renada so that we can also know about your issues and concerns. And there, you can please do scan the QR codes to be able to download this app and continue the conversation there. So once again, thank you to our resource persons and thank you to our audience for joining us today. Again, I'm Pia Renada. See you next time.